And the Broncos play the Melbourne Storm tomorrow night at Amy Park, a venue where the Broncos have not won since 2015. The Storm have always had Broncos' alternate timeline vibes. First, Glenn Lazarus leaves in 98 and wins a premiership the next year. Then Bellamy leaves Bennett and starts his own dynasty, then almost comes back in 2012 or so before a board member puts their foot in it. Slater, Cronk and Smith all come up in the Broncos nursery and they whiff on them all, and they couldn't convince Smith to come over for his last contract as well. Greg Inglis makes a handshake deal and no one thinks to involve ink or paper. Munster got turned down at a Broncos camp. Grant is from Gladstone, which isn't really Broncos territory, but it should be. Xavier Coates was a Bronco and his brother still is. Huge rap on Philip Coates though. Have you seen the bloke? Jack Howarth went to BBC and he's been with the Storm since he was like 15. He's laid out, by the way, not sure why, but I refreshed the team list while writing and he wasn't on it. And sure, I never saw Lazarus play and Bellamy had to go because Bennett still had another 2 decades. They wouldn't have developed the big three the same as the Storm did while maintaining one of their legendary teams in a premiership window. Howarth would have probably been debuted and ruined by Seabold, and I just don't want to think about how things could have been different if they'd spotted Munster. But the vibe has shifted in recent years. Most recently, the Storm put the Broncos' 2024 season in the grave, and aside from a finals round 1 thumping in 2023 on the back of a Reece Walsh masterclass, it's been one-way traffic for Melbourne for what seems like the last decade. Broncos come in with a few changes, the most important being the return of Payne Haas. Corey Jensen starts in place of the injured Xavier Willison, Willison having taken Corey's starting spot when Jensen had DVT. Then Jack Gosiewski stays starting while they give Brendan Piakura another week to recover from his 3rd concussion this season. Bit concerning. So Ben Tolte, who's undefeated at NRL level, comes back onto the bench, and Jaden Hunt gets the last spot on the bench. Tyson Smoothie back to 18th man. Sorry, James Graham. Bringing back the best player in the world has its benefits. Haas has only played 1 game of the last 3, the para game where he turned his ankle in the warm-up and played limited minutes. He's still carrying that back injury and probably the ankle too. But I saw an interesting quote, which I forgot to save from his trainer the other day, which was to the effect that a couple of weeks off for Payne doesn't really solve much, and that actually moving his back and his ankle is really necessary for his recovery. So don't think Payne's been laying back, putting in work into the power broker by Robert A. Caro. He's still been out there training, busting a gut, but we can probably safely assume Payne is absolutely raring to play. He wanted to play against South and he was in hospital the day of the game, and now heading into a massive rivalry game where the team has a chance to prove that not only are they a potential top 4 team, but they're a premiership contender that can beat anyone. I don't think there's much need for motivation. There's nothing to suggest that Haas has been particularly held back by the infected cut that ruled him out of last game, and in any case, remember that he played one of the best games of his career, Origin 1 this year, having only done 15 minutes of training before the game, and he played Origin 3 cold, so as long as he's on the field, all is well. We'll see how that affects the bench rotation. Obviously, the more minutes for Haas, the better, but without a real line-bending presence coming off the bench like they had with Willison, they're going to need to make do with Hetherington and Tolte, which isn't too bad. But the luxury of having 3 guys that it takes multiple guys to tackle in Haas, Carrigan and Willison is one the Broncos have dined on in the big games that they've won this season, and Willison especially was massive in both Bulldogs wins and their recent win against the Wires. But they've still got plenty of go forward with Jensen, who's a great, honest, up-the-guts runner, and Ricky has been getting some really valuable meters for them over the last month. The Broncos will just need to make sure that they keep a tight leash on the forwards and the rotation moving as much as they can, because Harry Grant is in great form right now and is tiring out opposition packs all game and then running through them. In the battle of the packs, the Storm is pretty big. Like Stefano and Kamikamika are both huge, but they tend to play off their middles more than through them. So it's a big job for Walsh keeping his eyes on the ruck as well for a charging Pappenhausen through the middle. Without Hughes, the Storm are a bit limited, and a banh mi tastes different without the bread. A lot of food references this week, and Hughes' absence means that the Broncos probably have a pure talent advantage. Not that Wishart wouldn't start on at least every single bottom 8 team, but there's still matchups all over the park in this game. Haas vs Stefano, the guy who carried the New South Wales forward pack this season, and the guy who stood and watched a try be scored under the posts. King and Jensen, workhorse v workhorse. Reynolds vs Munster, battle of the captains, and especially how Tony Staggs protects his captain and defends his edge against Munster. Walsh vs Pappy, 2 guys with similar skill sets but different games. Coates vs Cobbo, Grant vs Hunt, the apprentice showing the master how much he's learned. Grant Anderson showing out for his new coach next season. Billy Walters started his career in Melbourne before seeing the light. And the big mismatch for the Broncos, Eli Katoa versus Jack Gosiewski. And Melbourne are 100% going to kick to Katoa because it works against everyone, and Katoa basically scores a try every game. And they're going to try it out on Gosiewski. I think that Gosiewski is absolutely up for it, and Sheba and Cobbo have probably spent some time defending kicks after conceding to Dodd last week. It's going to be a battle on that edge, and the Storm definitely have an advantage with Katoa. Another week of Selwyn, and we've seen the highs and lows of Selwyn Cobbo, and I don't know how you roll the Selwyn dice 5 times, get 5 good games, because the Broncos can't really afford to have a bad Cobbo game in this run to the finals. And he's also auditioning to get Bostock's spot at Redcliffe and big money out of PNG or Perth, or apparently come back to Brisbane, so hopefully the Rockets still up him from last week. Then, of course, and I shouldn't have left this until last, but here it is, Reece Walsh is in a form that we've seen once before, and it's so good that I almost don't want to say it out loud. And the team's turnaround and attacking ability comes from him, and he is rolling and full of confidence. Whether or not the Melbourne Storm defence will allow him to get out of the ruck and into the realm of woe, it's probably a very different story from how often the South Sydney Rabbitohs let him live there. Obviously, there's a difference between Souths and the Storm right now, and at most, the Storm might only give the Broncos a half chance, where Souths were handing over chances at every opportunity. And it'll be a case of whether or not the Broncos can play a game where they can recognise and take advantage of those half chances. And maybe they do try and break out of their own half on tackle 3 by running the split action play involving Carrigan, Reynolds and Walsh. Or they create extra chances through offloads or having guys in support on half breaks, Hunt getting the ball quickly out of dummy half like he did last week, and actually having the patience to get through a set and play a battle of attrition, which this game might be. But to be honest, I think we're looking at a shootout. Two of the best attacking teams of the comp. The Storm lead the comp in attack. Still good defenses, but there's plenty of points in this one, which the Broncos win. Maybe. Please. All right, bye.